All right, the administrator's in the room, so we're going to get started. The first thing we need to do is to vote for a chair for the ELED. And is there a nomination?
I'll nominate Michael Wilson.
Was there a second?
I was going to second that nomination.
It's been moved and seconded that we elect Michael Wilson as chair. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? You know, sometimes they do it 3 times, but with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Michael? Here is the,
Only one I got. I just don't need to look over your shoulder, that's all, because I didn't get one.
here is your gavel. And want to remind people, please make sure your light is on and speak into the mic.
Thank you, Chairman Bernard. Is there a nomination for secretary? Is there a nomination for secretary?
Yes, I'd like to nominate J.D. Pavick.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any other nominations? Any other nominations? All those in favor for J.D. Pack being the secretary, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. Motion carries. Sheriff Roberts, I understand you have a presentation for us.
Yes, good morning. My name's Craig Roberts, Sheriff of Clackamas County, and I want to start out by extending my thanks to the ELED members. Many of you have been here for a long time. I want to thank you for your service. Also welcome Mike Wells as a new member, and as always, we're happy to give each and any one of you tour through the facilities, answer any questions. So beyond today, we encourage you to reach out to us, and we'll do the same for different opportunities to kind of understand more about the organization. So what I'd like to do now is just do introductions. So I'll start at my right.
Yeah, Captain Shane Strangfield.
Angela Brandenburg, Undersheriff.
Jenna Morrison, Chief Deputy.
Nancy Hartman, Sheriff's Finance Manager.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started talking about the Enhanced Law Enforcement District, the fiscal year 2019-20, our budget presentation. I think just to start out, clearly the mission of the Enhanced Law Enforcement District embraces the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office mission to preserve life, uphold the law, prevent crime, hold offenders accountable, and promote safety while finding innovative solutions and building partnerships with the community. And I think that all starts with the amazing Enhanced Law Enforcement District board members, so thank you. The next thing I want to just talk about and kind of recap a little bit of history of how we got here in the district and how things have changed just a little bit. So I'm going to go through the beginning of the Enhanced Law Enforcement District. So the Clackamas County Enhanced Law Enforcement District, also known as ELED, was approved by the voters back in November 8th of 1994 and began levying taxes July 1st, 1995. The permanent tax rate of 0.7198 per thousand assessed value is used to assess taxes on properties lying within the district boundaries. The goal of the ELED was to provide an improved level of patrol services in the unincorporated area of Clackamas County within the metropolitan urban growth boundary, including the cities of Happy Valley and Johnson City. Now, back in July 1st, 2003, the city of Happy Valley opted out of the district after passing a law enforcement local option tax. In keeping with the goal of the district to provide additional patrol services within the boundaries of the district, Happy Valley contracts for full-time law enforcement services with the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. The Clackamas County Sheriff's Office also provides the personnel for Happy Valley's Police Department. The fiscal year 2019-20 budget is built to support 36 sworn positions. This is the same staffing level as in the fiscal year 2018-19. One full-time deputy was added to the ELED staff in fiscal year 14-15, in fiscal year 17-18, and fiscal year 18-19. Additionally, the budget supports materials and services costs for 36 positions. These items include uniforms, our C800 radio support, and dispatch services. The ELED proposed tax revenue for fiscal year 1920 is $7,275,046. This represents a $275,845 increase, or a 3.94% from the prior fiscal year. This budget's revenue of $6,999,201, along with the $895,234 in projected beginning fund balance. The total proposed for fiscal year 1920 ELED budget is $8,290,780. The major budget items for the ELED are $6,171,517 to fund costs for those 36 positions, which include 1 recruit deputy, 28 deputies, 6 sergeants, 1 lieutenant. This figure from fiscal year 1819 includes salary, fringe benefits, overtime, holiday pay, and workers' compensation cost. There's $644,097 for professional services, which includes a 4.65% increase in the cost for dispatch services provided by CCOM, and $178,870 in a building note principal and interest for our North Station building. This is a reduction of 0.01% from the prior fiscal year of $180,540. The Sheriff's Office, as always, is committed to remaining good stewards of the ELED funds. These resources will be used to achieve the district's goal related to emergency response, full service law enforcement, and neighborhood quality of life. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Nancy Arman, who's going to go over some more details in the budget. Nancy?
Thank you, Sheriff. As you can see, the funding for the Enhanced Law Enforcement District remains consistent and stable. The district is not impacted by compression as the levy is, so it witnesses approximately on average a 4% increase per year in its tax base. For fiscal year 1920, there's also a substantial ending fund balance that's predicted of nearly $900,000. Captain Strangfield will speak later about the plan for those funds, but we are looking toward what is best for the district and in keeping in the district's mission, which was outlined to you earlier by the sheriff. In looking at the split between revenue and expense, 11%, that $895,000, is beginning fund balance. The remaining 89% comes from the taxes collected by the district. Our expense is broken out by cost allocation, debt service, materials and services. As you can see, cost allocations account for 4%. Debt service for the North Station building is 2%, and our materials and services costs are 94%. Again, you'll see in materials and services, contracted services, that is the amount that actually is allocated toward the Sheriff's Operations Fund in the ELED budget there, and that's where the personnel is reflected. So you won't see personnel here per se, but that contracted services piece is the personnel cost. Okay, I'll turn it over to Captain Strangfield to speak to you about attrition.
Thank you again for having me today, members of the board and the county commission. The ongoing emerging issues that I would like to talk about are our staffing issues that we have previously been to the board and talked about, but for the ELED, this is also an important factor that 43% of our sworn leadership staff, which includes our sergeants and above, within the next 5 years in the agency, which includes the ELED staff, are eligible for retirement. 21% of all Sheriff's Office staff across the board will be eligible for retirement also within the next 5 years. That's important towards our plan for the district, which is to continue working on the staffing and hiring because, as we all know, the training cycle to hire deputies and get them fully trained and out is about 18 months. from when we hire until we can see them on the streets. So knowing that hiring and training cycle is on us to hire and replace the potential 43% of our supervisory staff and up to 21% of our actual staff on the road, that's an important emerging issue that we have to acknowledge and be prepared for as we continue to plan with the ELED, with those budgetary discussions that we're having with the ELED board. So our plan is to continue to have those discussions and work with the ELED board with the funds that we currently have and those projected fund balances to make a plan to work towards those attrition goals and work on that. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Chief Deputy Morrison to talk about performance.
I'm going to turn it over. Sorry. I'm going to let Nancy continue.
So we've included for your reference the current goals and performance measures of the Sheriff's Office. This isn't in our MFR format. However, we wanted you to have this information, and it is updated with fiscal year 1920 projections and estimates for 1819. As we go through the Managing for Results process, we will have goals that are linked to our budget and based on performance area. This is here for you, again, just as reference.
All right, so, yeah. So, Chair Wilson, at this time, we'd like to turn it back over to you for any questions you or the board might have.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Bernard?
So I think I may have just realized something that I didn't before, and the ELED is enhanced law enforcement for UGMAs, urban growth boundaries of various cities. Milwaukee, for example, so unincorporated areas of Clackamas County. And Damascus being one of those, doesn't exist anymore. At least most people don't see it as existing. But you lost money when that community dissolved because you had additional contracts beyond the enhanced law enforcement, or that replaced the ELED.
So that's true, and it's a good point. We had 4.65 equivalent FTE funded by the city of Damascus for a police services contract. Unfortunately, the calls for service haven't gone away, and we definitely still are responding, but without the additional income or bodies to do so.
So right now, instead of 4 that were funded through the city contract, the enhanced law enforcement provides what? 1?
It isn't really allocated per se by FTE. Captain Stringfield, would you like to address that?
Sure. The ELED specifically for Damascus and all those addresses, knowing that what specifically that funds would be a whole nother question to research. So it's not allocated by, it's in a larger district. So the Damascus district now is part of a much larger district, which includes Boring and part of Mount Hood. So it all fell to that larger districting model. And rather than the dedicated staffing that the city of Damascus paid for. Now, I'd also like for the record to be clear that not all of the city of Damascus was in the 1994 urban growth boundary that was set by the ELED. So I can't say that all of the city of Damascus was in the ELED when they left. So that's another tax assessor question mapping thing, because the urban growth boundary that the ELED in was from 1994 and did not grow with what you see as the urban growth boundary today.
And just to follow up on that too, it's just that it is really a little bit of a moving target with the geographic district, with Happy Valley annexing at their rate. So we're more than happy to provide you the geographic district so you can kind of see, but to follow up with Shane, the entire city is not in that district though.
So when you're dealing with like Wilsonville, which is growing also very fast,
Right.
and you're dealing with Happy Valley, it seems like negotiating a contract is a monthly exercise almost. But how often do you negotiate contracts? How
Really.
annually? So it's an annual negotiation.
And to just kind of give you the history on the contract, that it literally took about probably 2.5 years. And one of the first things we looked at is really creating a cost model that was fair to both sides. That initially, when I looked at the contract, honestly, the county was subsidizing our contract cities. And that what we wanted to do is create a fair model. We went to King County, Washington. They provide a lot of contracted police services. I spent a lot of time there. We actually then involved all the cities in a long process and finally came to an agreement. And there was a substantial increase. I want to say about a 14% increase that first year. The contract only allowed, I think, for an 8, and then we were able to, the following year, brought it up. And we continue to reevaluate that contract to make sure that it's reconciled actually annually. They now have the decision, and a lot of questions come up about overtime. The city can say, hey, I want 5 people out here on overtime. And they pay for that service, and then we provide that for them. So a lot of those decisions are really made by what the city would like.
That's actually a good point for the other budget. In general, actually, that wouldn't apply to the general sheriff's budget, but it would apply to the ELED. That if a city no, it does apply to the other budget, not the ELED, because cities contract may want overtime, so that would be reflected in your budget. And in theory, it would be reflected in theirs that they're paying you more. But that link hasn't really been made. I know Wilsonville and Happy Valley is a contract city, so they can call for more folks, which would be reflected in your overtime, which we sometimes look into more. But we also don't note that the income differential, and that might be something that would be better pointed out in the budget process. Cities' requests for additional overtime would be a little more, transparent.
Yeah, I did want to say the contract actually with the King County, after we were all said and done, they came down and took our model back because they felt like it was a little more detailed. So, but they were a big help in getting that straight.
Mr. Savas.
I'm going to flag something for our staff, our accounting staff, maybe to work on. Well, I have a follow-up question, but I think I need to get this on the table first because there seems to be an error. I could be wrong. So I'm looking at page 4 and page 5 of the budget for ELED. And by the way, thank you for all the hard work y'all do, and definitely appreciate all of our deputies out there doing what they do every day. Public safety is very important. So I'm looking at the top of page 4, and it says, where you see it says 2019-20 proposed budget. It says down there, the line in bold, it says $8,290,000, basically, right? And I look down at page 5, and it says fiscal year 18-19 proposed budget, and the bottom line is $8,290,000. So is that supposed to say 19-20 and not 18-19? Because it seems to be there's an error.
It should say 1920.
Okay. That helps a little bit, all right? So my next question, that has to be fixed, by the way. The next question, before we approve the budget, the next question I have is to the graph on the bottom of page 5, all the way to the left. And this is a district, so your revenue is flat. And essentially, your revenues should basically equal your expenditures. And if you look at 16-17, fiscal year 16-17, the blue and red line are pretty well mated like that, right? They're kind of like married right there. And that should really be the trend, minus a little bit of carryovers. But it certainly spikes up considerably, it's what's in the proposed. So is that spiking up at a rate that can be sustained with the property tax revenue? Because the deltas between these pages, when I do the math, I don't see how you do that. They don't add up, and it could be because the columns are maybe the error that I first mentioned, but you've got a delta you really can't sustain.
Right, and I'm not quite sure, Commissioner, with all due respect to the hard work that went into putting this document together, wasn't a document that was created by the Sheriff's Office. But what I can tell you is that we have submitted a balanced budget, so we're not proposing expenses to exceed revenue.
So if last year was 6,900,000, or let me see the amended budget, 18-19 amended, 18-19 projected, you got a carryover, which you didn't spend. So therefore, that carryover is 895,000. My question is, how do you sustain 8,290,000 in the coming year when that one-time carryover revenue is gone?
So it's very likely that our budget will actually be reduced next year if the fund balance is spent. We don't intend to keep it at that level. So with the ELED and looking at the revenue and projecting forward to create a budget, since we didn't finish our managing for results process and we're still in that, we wanted to have the time to work directly with our advisory committee and to make an informed decision on how we would allocate those funds and look at performance goals. So that $895,000 that you see likely won't be there next year because we'll probably put it into action, and we're not going to keep that budget at that level. We'll reduce the budget down to reflect the tax base.
Right, okay, yeah. All right, I'm just kind of wondering, again, that we're not putting the district in an unsustainable
We are not.
rate.
We are
is-
not.
Is my concern. So with that, I want to go to the handout on your measures. I just want to call it out, and maybe this is something that maybe some of the advisory board members can help me answer a little bit. Appreciate the MFR process, but I'm looking at the bottom of page 3, which is the first one, and the bottom line says by 2019, violent crime rate will be less than 95 per 100,000 persons per year. So are we saying, what's the population of the district?
Let me
That's a
count.
good question, but also, if I may, just for a moment, I'd like to point out that these are the sheriff's office-wide goals and objectives. They aren't specific to the ELED. Bringing them forward today, we just wanted to show what they were and to mention that the ELED has a part in helping us attain those goals.
Okay, all right. So, two things, and the easy one to point out here is that, so the measure is less than 95, so the smaller the number, the better, right?
Correct.
Okay, and your actuals or projected is just that. I'm just wondering why the bar isn't lower. I mean, it would seem to be ideal that, we had the number at 70 versus, and he had an actual 76, you have something to strive for. But it seems the bar is set really high.
Certainly.
I'm just kind of curious as to why the bar is so high. Are we expecting a ramp up in violent crimes?
No, and quite frankly, we haven't changed any of the goals or objectives here because we're really focusing our energy toward managing for results. So it's based on basically an old goal, but again, we just wanted to bring it forward to say, here's what we're currently measuring. But when we come forward to next year, we're going to have a plan that is updated and that looks at current rates and will be a little bit more in tune with what you're saying. So we'll look at current data, we'll look at rates, and we'll adjust accordingly. And we definitely will have goals and objectives that make us reach a bit. We're not going to make it be an easy goal.
So have the advisory board members been involved in the MFR process as far as setting some of the goals?
We have been, we had a presentation on it, but we haven't been advised in any type of format for that.
Okay. I think it'd be helpful either, at least on the ELED aspect, but you mentioned this is not ELED, these numbers, these are
Right.
district,
Those are
or
the
di- or
sheriff-wide.
countywide.
Yes, and as Captain Strangfield mentioned, we definitely are going to engage the ELED Advisory Committee. We're at the beginning stages of that. So the sheriff, undersheriff, and chief deputy just met with Marv. He came back out and looked over our plan, kind of updated them because we have had a change in our upper leadership. And we're now really gearing up to meet the goal of the county administrator to get that plan completed just as soon as practicable. But one of the aspects of that will definitely be engaging the ELED Advisory Committee in helping define goals that are specific to their district.
Right, okay. And finally, when we talk about the crime, looking at that stat, I was trying to find, okay, where is violent crime in the crime report? And Sheriff, you came Thursday with the crime report. that 2-page little thing which is in the back. And then I walked in this morning, I saw another one, which I perused that. I couldn't find a stat that reflects violent crime and some of the other ones that are on the PowerPoint. And then I did over the weekend start to look at other jurisdictions, like Washington County, different cities in the state of Oregon. And they have, 50, 60-page crime reports. And the 2013 Clackamas County is like 30 pages. It's a great report. And you can extrapolate out of that 2013 report something. But I was just wondering if we have a similar 2018 or 2019 report that looks like the Clackamas County Sheriff's 2013 report.
Yeah, no, great question. I'm sure that also came from another individual who keeps challenging some of our crime data. So one of the things that it now gives you the ability to do is select specific. We had region for a while that basically was a challenge. You might recall we explained that we went to Mark 43, which is a different data and analytical system that we're trying to get better data on, which was a big investment for the sheriff's office. And is nationally, New York PD uses this same system, because we're trying to get real-time data. Where I'm trying to get at, which has been a big hurdle because there's nobody in the country that does this, is Mark 43 was a data system developed by some brilliant engineers. And what it does is, what I want to be able to do is walk into roll call, and on a television monitor, it's going to tell you crime data up or down and where the hot spots are. It has to be instantaneous. And so they have been building this system to make sure that we're getting the most. We want to have folks be able to open it on their phone. The data that we currently have is the annual report, which there's a big website change going on. And there is some old data up there. But there is a specific link that you can click on and download whatever section you want in the crime data. So there's when we went to Mark 43, there's some data that's not available. I can give you an idea. For example, some of the towed vehicles and some of that data was not available in the system that Mark 43 had.
Yeah.
I mean, or region.
Yeah, so when we talked last Thursday, and Mr. Feely and I were asking for, when you mentioned calls for service, and asked for how many of those were dispatched, was his word, which is, and then by category, will violent crime be one of those categories? Because I'm referring again to the PowerPoint you have here today. You have as one of those. I'm just looking for the data. I mean, it seems to me that as I mentioned to you, I've got a number of folks that have indicated that there's ongoing issues maybe where the sheriff's office has not responded or dispatched apparently. And I'm just kind of, will we have that by tomorrow, or when do you anticipate us having that?
We'll get it as soon as we can. I don't want to give you an exact time. I know they're working on it. I know that was a request that's made. We're definitely going to get you. I can tell you, and I kind of want to reiterate this a little bit, because just like in the ELD, you can kind of see where in the last several years we've added people. The contract cities have added people in the last several years. And when you correlate that to, which is the important data that I wanted to reiterate again, is that our calls for service have dramatically gone up. It's now 81,404 calls for service. In 2017, that was 69,000. And so my point is that this is a dramatic increase in demand for services from patrol. And in the unincorporated area, we have really just maintained for some time and not added additional people. I'm pleased to say that in the last several years, ELED, we've been able to add those positions. I can tell you that there is an increase, a 12% increase, and that's what we pointed out in here in this literature that we handed to you, an increase in major crimes in 2017. Now, major crimes include arson, aggravated assault, burglary, attempted murder, rape, robbery, theft, and stolen vehicles. And we're doing a lot of different issues on a variety of those different fronts to bring crime down in those particular areas, but that's kind of a quick overview.
Right. Well, yeah, last week you mentioned Washington County, so I did go back online. I looked at the 2016, 17, 18 crime reports for Washington County, and I was kind of struck because their budget's similar in size to ours. They have 593,000 people in that county, but they have 170 deputies on patrol alone. And I thought for the same amount of budget, and actually the unincorporated rate is actually similar to ours, it's 200,000. I might encourage you to go online. I tried to print it off, but I couldn't. It's difficult to print it off that, but I was kind of struck that they have twice as many deputies, or not twice as many, but considerably more deputies, and they're operating on the same budget, annual budget as well, and with their combined districts and levies and so forth, all combined.
And I think I had mentioned they added 10 last year and are adding 10 this year. You know, I talked to the sheriff, so they're adding an additional 20 positions. And their calls for service per officer, again, was 6 calls per hour compared to ours, 17, I believe it was, 16 or 16.
Yeah, I
Calls per
encourage
hour,
maybe
so-
our folks to look at the 2013 report. I think that was
Yeah.
pretty well done. I mean, it could probably be enhanced. And then maybe go online and look at, like a lot of our cities have pretty detailed crime reports. I was pretty impressed.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, I'm going to bring it back to, we made a decision to go with region. We didn't want to be the only person or only agency in the metropolitan area that did not go to region. Portland led this effort of a call dispatch system that was tracking all the calls for service. What happened was I was probably one of the last people to join on because I knew there were some challenges. And soon a lot of the analytics and data that we wanted was not being provided. And it came to be a point, a decision where we really needed the data. And so we had to move away from region, as did the majority of the agencies in the metropolitan area. And we were the first to go to Mark 43, and really everybody's been following us since then. And our goal is, as I mentioned, is to get that data immediately, provide better analytics to really help the frontline officers identify where the issues are.
Thank you. Mr. Marvick.
I have a question about officers in the field within the district and how they report their time. Let's say an officer is patrolling in the Oak Grove area, and there's a call for service that demands he go outside the district. At the end of the day, how does he account for that time, and how is that accumulated on an annual basis so we know that the hours we're paying for are being served within the district?
Sure. So that's a very difficult thing to do, considering the nature of law enforcement, where the opposite of that is also true. There are a lot of county resources that are coming into the ELED to put a lot of time into the ELED that may not be assigned to that district as well. It's very fluid in the fact that people are on training, they have court, they respond to calls to help and then come back. So your ask is the staff in tracking to do that is literally so high that it's not an impossibility, but it would be a very large staff request to track individual deputies assigned every day, both in and out of the ELED to account for the hours. What I can tell you is that we track and assign the deputies that are assigned on the ELED FTE list, and know that those other things are going on. So we're constantly making sure that the ELED is fully staffed, first and foremost, both the levy and the ELED. So we're making sure that that is staffed first as a priority, and then we go from there.
And to just kind of highlight, I mean, an example would be is that, first of all, they assign somebody to that district. But the second thing I think is you really have to take a look at is we bring oftentimes tremendous resources far and beyond what the ELED pays for. It only can take one homicide in that district, and I've got a homicide detective working cases that are 2 years. And in addition, just if you think about some of the major cases that we've had, Wilsonville, for example, we had the fire in Wilsonville, the huge fire. I mean, it was 100 positions down there from all around, a huge contribution from us. So the contract city, they picked up the majority of the standard calls for service, but that was some of the things that they got extra. And same with the ELED, is that if there is, which is a high call for service, we do deploy a lot of resources down in there, in addition to just your patrol deputy.
Okay, so as I understand this, prior to the ELED, there were X number of deputies that covered the entire county. When I voted in '94 to pass this, it was, and I think my neighbors felt the same, we were going to enhance what was already being done. In other words, if a third of an FTE was being paid for through the general fund, and we expected additional, not supplanting what was already done, additional law enforcement within the district. So on average, then, how many officers, excluding vacation, sick time, and all those other variables, per day, distributed through 3 shifts, will be normally, if nothing else was going on, operating within the district?
The entire ELED. There are multiple districts in the ELED, and I have a chart here if you want to answer, hand it out to me here, that we provided. So the ELED funding per district has the Clackamas districts, the what we call the west side of Clackamas County, and our McLaughlin Boulevard 99E district. There are 4 shifts. Sorry,
You're talking about the service you're providing in different districts.
Yeah, no, I'm getting to the numbers here.
Okay.
Yeah, so in those districts, based on 4 different shifts, we have, get it here.
10.
So 10 per shift,
It's 10 total per day.
10 total per day, okay. 10 per day covering the 4 shifts just for the ELED Enhanced Law Enforcement District, covering the whole law enforcement district, which is split up into different smaller districts as well. Did that answer your question? It's just funded by the ELED. 10 people over 4 shifts, 7 days a week, 365, 24/7,
10 for the entire district,
every day.
every day.
No, those are 10 that are paid for by the ELED. There are additional positions that are being funded through the general fund that are also covering the ELED.
There's
That-
more staff than just in those districts on top of the ELED, but just funded by the ELED, it's 10.
Okay. So you have no way of knowing at any 1 month or any year whether or not that commitment has been fulfilled or not?
That commitment, we do fully staff it, but that's the starting point. I think what your question is like, how many people aren't covering that because of vacation, taking another call, or maybe you can clarify for me.
I think I understand his question.
Okay.
I guess how many people had even been diverted from, if I may?
Yes.
Hit me if I'm wrong. But how many of your ELED assigned people are being diverted to outside of the district, at perhaps at the detriment of the district? And then do you track that to make sure that the commitment of the district, as spelled out, and the time spent is dedicated to the district? That there's a reconciliation of sorts.
Or if resources have to be brought in, do you track that? Do you know that?
And yeah, I mean, I could echo what he said earlier. As with the district, it is, as I had mentioned, it's a moving target. It is the Happy Valley is annexing and it's changing, and so I can guarantee you one thing is that for the funds out of the Enhanced Law Enforcement District, we take a deputy and basically assign him to that district. Now, if he went across the street on one side of the streets district, on the other side's not, we don't have the ability to track that, so I don't. I can tell you, I can give you breakdowns on deployment of a lot of resources on some things where we could say, hey, you know, we had 5 major murders or rapes, and we deployed this amount of resources to that. But my hope is someday we can be able to do that, but today I don't have that ability.
The reason I ask is I worked 40 years in the communications business, and the technicians had a time card, and they were assigned areas for doing different things and service orders. And they were moved from those tasks on a daily basis and sometimes on an hourly basis. And they put that down on their card and they turned it in. It seems to me that it would be a simple task for a deputy to know whether he was inside the district or outside the district, and simply put on a card and turn it in at the end of his shift. I was in the district 8 hours tonight, or I was in the district 4 hours tonight. And you would know instantly how many hours on an annual basis were being spent in the district. And you would also know when people came into the district. And to say that the district is not covered by other deputies within the county that we're paying for through the general fund taxes and the general fund budget that you have is erroneous. We're paying for that through other taxes. We're paying to have additional deputies within the district protecting us. And it seems to me that we don't know that that's happening.
I think the point's been made. Can we move on to another question?
I think Mr. Pavick was next.
Pavick?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have two questions for you. One, I think will point out the difficulties that you have in doing your job. And the second one has to do with the fact that we'll always ask more of you. So the first has to do with staffing. And your report shows that you're very close to 50% of retirees over the next 5 years on that sergeant and above category, right? Underneath that, you've got, I think, 20-some% on those lower grades that will also be retiring. So it occurs to me that many of those higher level positions will be filled from people below. And so if we were just to assume that everybody that is retiring at the higher level is succeeded by somebody already employed below, that seems to me, it suggests that you've got to start hiring a lot of people, and also that it may be much more difficult to hire qualified candidates than it has been in the past for a multitude of reasons. So, yeah, I'd like a response on how, and I notice you've got it listed as an issue, and I'm wondering how big of an issue it really is. I think it's bigger than just a couple line items here.
So I'm gonna let you go first, and I'll pick up after you. He was
Sure.
wanting to-
We've noticed this issue for many, many years, and over the last 5 years, we've really focused on making sure that and pushing towards being fully hired. Now, I want to thank Chief Morrison for really differentiating between being fully hired and fully staffed. We have currently just in patrol, and this includes people that are going to end up working in the ELED, levy positions, and general fund positions. We currently have 18 people in a training cycle that affects our total staff number availability to work patrol. they're not available. They're out in training. They're at the academy. They're, going through the recruitment process. I mean, just, from all levels of the hiring process. 18 staff right now that could be working county deputies on patrol or in a training cycle, because we've been working towards being fully hired on the FTE numbers that we have. That being said, that cycle, like I said before, is up to 18 months. And so they're just not available for me and effectively being able to be assigned to a patrol district for that entire training cycle. As you can see, that issue of up to 43% of our sergeants and above have the eligibility of retiring in the next 5 years. That just kind of could perpetuate us having even more staff unavailable to us in a training cycle if we're not keeping ahead of that training cycle and trying to be hired ahead and projecting towards that cliff. If we don't having people in that training cycle and hired, I'm going to have more than 18 people unavailable to me working patrol districts, and that's that issue that we've really identified and working towards to keep ahead of that cycle.
And to just kind of reiterate, we really started on this plan several years ago on the hiring. And we really looked at, what is it going to take to get qualified staff to fill these vacancies? And we really looked at what we were doing and what could we improve. A simple change we made is we actually brought back a retired military guy that also retired out of here and had him personally calling these applicants and basically reaching out to them, explaining all the benefits of the county, how this is a wonderful place to work, and really stayed in touch with that because it is a long process. And we felt like if we're doing a reach out, making sure that they know how the process is going, our success rate goes up, particularly on those candidates we don't want to lose because they're in competition with a lot of other agencies. So we are very fortunate right now to be at the staffing level that we are. I know when I talked to Washington County, I think they were down 30 or 40. I know Portland's down a tremendous, and when you look around the state, most people are not at their allocated staffing level. And that's why, Gary, I've talked to Gary, my concern is if you stop that freeze for the hiring process for us, it could be kind of this catastrophic event because with the folks retiring and then trying to make sure you're getting qualified personnel could be a challenge for us. So you're right.
And I'd like to reiterate that our qualified applicants and the people that we're hiring go through a rigorous process, as the sheriff mentioned. It's a long process, and it screens out a lot of people. I think the number was we hire about 4 out of every 100 that go through the process. So it's not an easy process to get through. And and as the sheriff said, we're very fortunate that we're almost fully hired, even though we have that process and that recruitment that we're doing to keep ahead of that cycle. So we're not lowering our standards to maintain that, and we're getting the applicants that want to work here in Clackamas County. We're very fortunate.
But I do want, I'm sorry, I just want to add that because we have those 18 people in training, we have to cover those positions or those areas with overtime. So I think a lot of times, or what has come up is you're fully hired, why isn't your overtime coming down? Well, it's not coming down because we have 18 people who aren't available to work on their own. So we still have to continue to cover those with overtime.
Thank you. That's encouraging. It's quite well managed, it seems. My second question has really to do with technology, and in your report, Sheriff, you talk about tracking arrest warrants, and I suspect that's technology supported. You earlier mentioned some system that would allow you real-time exposure to the hot spots, that type of thing. So my question relates actually somewhat to Myron's and somewhat to Commissioner Savas' prior questions. And it relates to how do constituents in the district judge how well the district is serving them. And cities have crime statistics, and one city can be compared to another, and it seems as if the district should be able to pull out its number of violent crimes per thousand and that type of thing. And so I'm wondering if you have a overall concept of where technology might assist you in your performance, and whether or not that could include enhanced GIS support and geofencing, so that it's not a manual task to go through these crime reports and say, oh, well, this person lives, let me find it on the map, and it's, and whether or not technology can support almost seamlessly, almost transparently, the creation of crime statistics within the district, so that we can say, well, this district compared to Lake Oswego or Wilsonville, we feel good about this. So, and if it were really comprehensive, I'm sure you have GPS on all your patrol cars, and then it's just a matter of math, whether a patrol enters a geofence boundary, the time, when it leaves, and the number of minutes it's there, and it's not a manual reporting, it's part of your infrastructure. So comments regarding that?
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think it's trying to find, that's, as I mentioned, when you look across this country of companies that do this, I'm just telling you, Region was a nightmare. It was horrible, and it came highly recommended. And our IT guys really did not want to go there, and the cost of building a system is even more enormous. And so that is this, Google up Mark 43 and look at this company. They basically, what I asked them to do, and we really were one of the first in the country to kind of bring them here. There's a couple other large agencies brought them, but I'm trying to get them to build an integrated system with our jail. So when we book them, I don't have a whole nother separate system over there. So I cannot go buy an off-the-shelf system that manages it from the time I book them to the time they go to the jail and have it all into one system. And our system at the jail is dying, and it can't really be backed up. And we're trying to find something. So I couldn't agree with you more. Instead of taking a note, it'd be great geo-tracking to see, and I could provide a report to you. My hope is with this company that we're able to develop and get some of that stuff. I can tell you that technology in solving crime is changing every day. And I can't even go into the details about how we're using technology to solve crimes, but it's mind-boggling of what we're able to do today. So for me, we should be able to track some of the stuff that you're talking about. And my hope is to get there. I can just tell you we're not there yet, and hope to be there soon.
Okay, we need to giddy up. So, Ken, are you done with yours?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you, Sheriff.
Ken,
Thank you.
and then Paul.
Yep, it's already been touched on that tech could probably help with the geo-tracking that Mr. Markwick was talking about. That said, tech costs money. We have to remember that, and how much you invest in that kind of accountability versus efficient, actually taking care of business is something you have to balance out, and I get that. I just wanted to point out that, as I've said before, doing ride-alongs, including with the Sheriff's Department, that the law enforcement is pretty fluid. Police departments leave their jurisdictions into the county area on a regular basis. Sheriffs come into the cities on a regular basis as they're doing their patrol. They respond to each other's emergencies on a routine basis. It's what was noteworthy in my experience with the police departments as well as the sheriff's departments to this point is the problems are all common. The same kinds of crimes, whether it's inside the city or outside the city, are pretty constant. and that the cooperative and working relationship between the sheriff's department and the city police departments is positive across the board, at least at the line level. I don't know what goes on at management level, but when you talk to the officers on the street, they're complimentary of their partners in the sheriff's department and vice versa. So I think in the main, your department and the city departments are doing an excellent job of coverage. So I'll leave it at that. That's been my experience so far. Thank you.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to on this report you've handed out today, just want to say that the breakout you have, this might get to Myron's point and maybe Mr. Pavick's point as well. You got the broken out by the cities, right? And at least not on hours spent, but at least on the crime report. And being that the district is about $7-8 million, it was seen to me that maybe that'd be a way, at least to broach this, is to have the report for the in-district elements of all these different crimes. I don't know what the city contracts amount to, but what I was struck about this though is that they're not numbered pages, so I guess it'd be the second page on the back side. The city of Wilsonville, which is about the same population as the city of Happy Valley, had twice as many of those crimes listed, 9,215, as the city of Happy Valley with 4,692. And I know the populations are close, they're in the over 20,000 each. But that the rate is twice as much. So that means our guys are out there working. But just the breakout of maybe what is going on in the district on behalf of the district, because it is something that is on the tax rolls, and it's something, probably I would say even more, a greater responsibility than that of a contract with the city. To some degree, I'm not saying they're superior, but just saying that because it's there and it's something that the citizens are obligated to of the district, that it should be a standalone report of what the district's performance is.
So I do want to add that there is a quarterly report given to the ELED committee on crimes that are being committed within each area of the ELED.
Okay,
So-
could I get that then?
Sure.
Because it's not in the packet today, is it? I
Right,
didn't
and it's
see
a
it.
quarterly report, so we can give you the most recent quarterly report.
So is that lumped together in an annual report?
It is not, I don't believe, but it is given out quarterly.
Okay, I'd love to see those.
And just one thing I wanted to add, just to talk about some of the other benefits the ELED receives, and they might not necessarily see it. BHU, we have 5 people in the behavioral health unit, mental health specialists that respond to this concentrated area of service. It's not even added on the ELED as a budgetary item. The other big issue that we've addressed, a number of issues in the ELED, is the neighborhood livability project. A number of areas where we put a tremendous amount of resources that are nowhere included in the budgetary stuff of this. And in addition to that, we also assigned somebody to the Joint Terrorism Task Force and the United States Marshals Fugitive Task Force. And warrants issued out of that district and the county, particularly a lot of these high-risk offenders, because I have somebody on the task force, which is not funded out of this, we basically have them track down a lot of these wanted individuals for us. And so I'm just trying to explain how there's a lot of other things that are tracking the cost that goes into that district is not covered.
Okay, I think we've pretty much beat the point down about getting some additional information. So if we could move on to something else. Commissioner Fisher?
For all of this really good conversation. I'm curious how the methodology, I'm looking at the enhanced budget and I see the categories here. I see some of those same categories in the larger budget. And I'm just curious how you decide, I'm estimating, but you get about 8 million, about 6 million goes to contracted services, which is shown as revenue in the big budget. How is everything else? Is it just a proportion of what it costs to maintain those contracted services? Is that how that is extra dollars are determined?
That's a very good question, Commissioner. Exactly true, except for the case of cost allocations, where in that regard, it's applied the same way that it is across the sheriff's office. So based upon FTE, a proportionate amount is allocated to operations, levy, and ELAD. Otherwise, we just look at the cost for the ELAD, how they've trended, and then base that into the budget proportionately.
So there aren't, because the larger budget has many other categories, and some of
Yes.
it, I was like, wow. I was curious if the sheriff's office is somewhat subsidizing the law enforcement district with some of the expenses that aren't listed on here.
That's another good question.
Yeah.
So even in the event if something is not actually budgeted within the district, if they incur a cost and a portion of that cost should be attributed to them during the year, they will pay for that portion. So if you were to look at a report that comes out of the general ledger from the county, you'll see a portion of that cost attributed to the ELAD.
Okay, so you
So-
really try to recoup that.
Absolutely. We do that for both the ELAD and the levy as well.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I have one question here. I notice in the administrator's budget recommendation on page 13, and this relates to an issue we had last year at the budget meeting concerning jail beds. I note it says in here that the sheriff's office, in response to prior budget approvals, has reached full deputy staffing and added deputies to open 26 unused jail beds. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's correct.
You want to
That is correct, yes.
Jenna?
In the process.
Yeah, we're in the process. So we got funding for 3 deputies, and then we got and then we didn't get the funding for the whole 6 at once. So we got the additional 3, our funding for the additional 3. Excuse me. I believe it was last month, and so we are in the process. We hope to have the beds open at the end of this year, early next year.
So this is not complete, it's still in the process. And so what's stated in here as being complete is not necessarily correct.
The allocation is complete. But like Shane said, it takes 18 months to get people up and trained and ready to go solo. So we just got the positions, and so that's what we're in the process of doing, is getting those people trained and on board so that they can open the 26 beds.
So the 26 beds are not open?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. Okay. It also states in here that this is not a sustainable position. How is that going to impact the ELAD?
Good question. So we had a presentation last Thursday afternoon discussing operations and levy, which are separate and distinct from the ELAD budget. So the taxing district has a healthy tax base, and its budget has remained sustainable and continues year over year to receive the same increase in rates. That's not necessarily the case in operations. There are a lot of different reasons why, and I'll just put simply, the costs have outpaced our revenue. So we're looking at how is that going to be remedied. The county administrator has a plan, and we're all going to work together this next year to reach a sustainable budget for the county-wide. But in terms of the ELAD, it is not impacted by that deficit in funding.
So is some of this remedy situation going to be a reassessment on home values? So tax revenues will relate to what an actual house cost, or is
Great question. Actually, in the assessor's budget this year, there are 2 additional positions that are going to be focused on doing just that. So we are going to get a more current assessed value rate countywide.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from, yes?
Sheriff Roberts, first I'd like to say thank you and to all of your staff. I think you all have the hardest job going in public service, so thank you very much. I've been a resident of Clackamas County for about 3 years. I've had interactions with your deputies, thankfully, in positive terms. I haven't been speeding or pulled over. Hopefully they'll keep that way. I've had nothing but phenomenal service, so thank you. For the data points for me and my family, just so you know, and I understand where you are, I'm very familiar with Region up in Portland and all of that. It's been a train wreck is a good way to describe that. Data, though, for me and my family, it's calls for service for the ELD district and calls for service per deputy. I know a lot of police officers all around the country, and I think you might have mentioned it, JD, we're asking our law enforcement to do more with less every year. So I'm concerned that the deputies serving in my community, I want them well-trained, well-supported, and rested. I don't want them working 15, 16-hour shifts 6 days a week. That's a recipe for bad things. The other data point that's very important to me is response time. And I don't know if Portland, we have priority 1s and 2s. we're averaging 9 minutes for a priority one. That is completely unacceptable to me. That's why I don't live in Portland anymore. I live here, and I don't know what the response time is, but I would suggest and recommend a good data point is calls for service, so that the community in the ELED can know that if it's a priority one call, and have some way to measure that. Because I think that, I just can speak for my day job in Portland, people do not feel safe because they know it can be 10+ minutes for a police officer to arrive for a priority one call. So I would just look at, as you're building this data metrics and providing that, I think that's a really good point. People always talk about reported crime. Of course, we know that a lot of property crime is not reported. So I don't put a lot of stock in reported crime, but calls for service are 100% accurate. So if we could maybe flush that out in the response time as well. So again, thank you very much, and I appreciate being a part of this process.
Yeah, and just to respond on the response times, it's just exactly what we're trying to look at, and managing for results is one of the things. Is our goal is to reduce that response time, and those you'll hopefully see next year, because that is what the patrol folks and everybody identified as some of the key things that we want to focus on and bring down. So we're thinking alike. So great suggestions.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? We'll now open for public hearing and receive public testimony. Is there anyone present that would like public testimony? Last call. Anyone present wishes to make public testimony? Thank you. Closed the public hearing. Any further questions from committee members or discussion? Call for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the committee approve the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget for the Enhanced Law Enforcement District as presented, and impose the maximum permanent tax rate within district boundaries.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the budget. Any other discussion?
Just one clarification of my first comment today about the date or the fiscal year. Is that, so the amount is how much? And it is fiscal year 1920 and not fiscal year 1819, correct? Any changes needed in regard to the motion?
As amended.
The figure's correct.
The figure is correct, but
Motion is correct, and the motion notes fiscal year 1920, so
All right.
update the document.
So we don't need an amendment to this? Okay, moving on. Any other comments, discussion? Last call. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by nay. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.